The dining room glittered with chandeliers that hung like frozen drops of gold. Crystal glasses caught the light, and silver cutlery gleamed against the white silk tablecloth. It was the kind of setting that could make anyone feel small, especially me. I sat quietly at the far end of the table, my back straight, my hands neatly folded on my lap. The scent of roasted lamb and garlic butter filled the air, but my stomach was tight with nerves. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. Our first family dinner since I had married into the wealthy Alastair family. For weeks I had rehearsed every smile, every polite nod, every phrase of gratitude I thought might earn me even the faintest approval of my husband's father. To him, appearances were everything, and I wanted so badly to show that I could belong. But even as laughter echoed around the table, I could feel it, the scrutiny. His eyes, my father-in-law, Richard Alastair, sat like a king at the head of the table, his jaw sharp, his gaze colder than the silver in front of him. Every word he spoke seemed dipped in disdain, as though the entire world failed to meet his impossible standards. I reminded myself to breathe. I told myself I was strong enough, and then it happened. He leaned back in his chair, swirling the deep red wine in his glass. His eyes cut across the table and landed on me like knives. "You know," he said, his voice smooth but loud enough to silence the chatter around him. "I have always believed that my son deserved the best, someone of class, someone who would elevate the family name, not—" His lips curled into a smirk, his eyes narrowing. "Not trash." The word hit the air like a slap. The table went silent. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Even the clinking of glasses seemed to stop. My chest tightened as the blood rushed to my face, burning hot. I wanted to believe I had misheard, but his cruel smile confirmed it. "Father," my husband Daniel shifted uncomfortably, but his voice faltered, too soft to carry weight. He looked at me, then at his father, then back at his plate, and he said nothing. The silence cut deeper than Richard's insult. I forced myself not to cry, though my throat felt like it was closing. My vision blurred slightly as I blinked rapidly, willing the tears not to fall. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, each thud a reminder that I was still alive, even though inside, a part of me felt like it was being crushed. Richard continued, his tone casual, as though he were discussing the weather. "She has no pedigree, no fortune, no influence. What exactly does she bring into this family? Tell me, Daniel, what did you see in her?" My husband's mouth opened, but nothing came out. He lowered his gaze, retreating into silence, betraying me in the most cowardly way possible, by standing by and letting me bleed alone. A quiet laugh slipped from Richard's lips. "Love, I suppose, HMPH. Love is cheap. Marriage should be about power, legacy, and wealth, not pity cases." The knife in my chest twisted. Around me, I felt the shift, the discomfort of Daniel's mother, who lowered her eyes, the quick glances of his siblings, caught between loyalty to their father and silent pity for me. Nobody spoke, nobody defended me. It was as though I had already been judged and sentenced, and the verdict was final. I swallowed hard, my pride choking me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my glass against the wall and demand respect. But something inside me held still. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. So I sat there, silent, a storm raging inside my chest. I lifted my fork again, though my hand trembled, and forced a bite past my throat that tasted like ash. I smiled faintly, though my heart was tearing itself apart. But deep inside, past the humiliation, past the shame, past the silence, I felt something awaken. Not rage, not despair, something sharper, a quiet, steady fire. That night, after the dinner plates were cleared and the laughter resumed as though nothing had happened, I excused myself and slipped away to the guest room Daniel and I were staying in. When the door clicked shut, I let the tears fall, muffling my sobs against the pillow. But when the storm inside me calmed, I sat up, wiping my face, my eyes raw but focused. He thought I was trash. He thought I wasn't enough. He thought I had nothing. But he had made one mistake. He underestimated me, and by morning he would know exactly who I was. Sleep never came that night. Daniel had turned beside me, his breathing slow and steady, his arm draped loosely across the bed as though nothing had happened. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every word, every glance, every silence at that dinner table. Not trash, I whispered to myself, my voice hoarse from crying, never trash, but the echo of Richard Alistair's voice still rang in my head. I turned, watching Daniel's sleeping face in the dim glow of the lamp. He had been the one person I thought would shield me, the one who promised to stand by me against the storms of his family. And yet, when his father's venom spilled across the table, he chose silence. The betrayal was quiet, but it pierced deeper than any loud argument ever could. I slipped out of bed, pulling a sweater around me, and padded softly to the small desk by the window. The city lights blinked far below, indifferent to my pain. Somewhere out there, people were laughing, eating, living, while I sat here, crushed under a single word, trash. But pain, I had learned long ago, was not permanent. It could be molded, it could be transformed, and for me, pain had always been fuel. Flashbacks of struggle, my mind drifted back to the narrow apartment I grew up in. The peeling wallpaper, the smell of fried onions that clung to the air, the sound of my mother's laughter as she worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat. We had little, but what we had was ours earned, not inherited. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table, my textbooks stacked high, studying by the weak yellow light of a single bulb. My friends went to parties, but I worked shifts at the corner store to pay for college books. Every penny mattered. When my classmates mocked me for wearing second-hand clothes, I learned to sew and turned those clothes into something I could be proud of. When I was told I'd never make it into business school, I worked harder and earned a scholarship. I had built my life piece by piece, brick by brick, with sweat and resilience. I had never been handed anything, and now this man, this arrogant father-in-law, dared to call me trash. If only he knew how much stronger I had become because of those years of struggle. If only he knew that the woman he dismissed was already more than enough. The husband's silence, the part that hurt most, wasn't Richard's insult, it was Daniel's silence. I remembered the early days of our love, when Daniel swore he would fight for me, that he would never let his family's judgment come between us. He told me I was everything to him, but last night he sat frozen, a boy cowering before his father's shadow, unable to speak a single word in my defense. That betrayal sat heavier on my chest than all of Richard's words combined. I wrapped my arms around myself, whispering, "You stood with him, not me." The sting of those words cut fresh tears from my eyes, but pain, again, hardened into resolve. A plan is born. I opened my laptop, the glow filling the room. My fingers hovered over the keys as ideas began to form. I wasn't going to scream or throw plates or demand apologies. That wasn't who I was. If Richard thought I had nothing to offer, then I would show him exactly what he had underestimated. Not with petty insults, but with proof. I began scrolling through my old documents, business plans I had written late at night, draft proposals for a startup idea I had been nurturing in silence. Years of work no one in this family knew about. Slowly, the fire inside me grew steadier, sharper. I realized I didn't need to tear him down to prove myself. All I needed was to stand tall and let my truth speak louder than his lies, and I knew exactly how I would do it. 3 messages, 3 truths, 3 blows that would make Richard Alistair understand that the woman he called trash was far more powerful than he ever imagined. As dawn broke, pale light streaming through the curtains, I sat back in my chair, exhausted but calm. The anger had burned itself into something clearer, conviction. I heard Daniel stir behind me, murmuring my name, half-asleep. I didn't turn, I didn't answer, because this battle wasn't about him anymore. This was between me and the man who thought he could break me. And tomorrow, when Richard Alastair opened his phone, he would find 3 messages waiting, 3 messages that would change everything. Morning came with the shrill vibration of a phone. Not mine, his. Richard Alastair was a man who lived by control. He woke at 6, read his newspapers, and checked the markets before even taking his first sip of coffee. His phone rarely brought him surprises. But that morning, as the golden light of dawn spilled across his marble floors, 3 unread notifications waited. 3 messages from me. Message 1, the truth of his empire. The first message was short, but it carried the weight of dynamite. Mr. Alastair, you once told me I bring nothing to this family. Allow me to remind you, your empire is not as unshakable as you believe. Attached are documents regarding the environmental violations your company has been burying for years. If made public, they won't just cost millions, they will destroy the Alastair name you're so proud of. I had spent months in silence, quietly observing, quietly researching. I had friends in places he didn't know existed, analysts, lawyers, and even a journalist who owed me a favor from my scholarship days. I didn't want to ruin him. I only wanted him to know I could. When Richard opened that file, his heart skipped. He saw scanned reports of illegal dumping sites, whistleblower testimonies, and pending lawsuits he thought buried forever. His grip on the phone tightened, his knuckles white. The woman he called trash was holding secrets sharp enough to slice through his empire. Message 2. The power he overlooked. The second message landed softer, but it cut deeper. You told me I had no wealth, no influence, nothing to offer. What you don't know is that I've been building something of my own. The startup I began quietly 3 years ago has just closed a funding round. Investors worth more than a quarter of your own board have put their trust in me. My name is already moving in circles that don't need your approval. Attached was proof. Contracts, statements, even a glowing article draft from a tech magazine waiting for its release. Richard blinked at the numbers, tens of millions in valuation. Not a trust fund, not a gift. Mine, earned. The irony was cruel and perfect. The woman he dismissed at his table last night was already worth more in reputation than some of his handpicked allies. The realization tasted bitter on his tongue. Message 3. The lesson he never learned. The third message wasn't about money. It wasn't about power. It was about respect. Your greatest weakness, Mr. Alastair, is that you confuse wealth with worth. You mistake silence for weakness and humility for emptiness. Last night you called me trash, but remember this. Family is not built on legacy or fortune. It is built on dignity, loyalty, and respect. You may never give me your approval, but you will never break me. You will learn, if not today, then one day, that the woman you tried to humiliate is stronger than the man who tried to destroy her. No attachments, no documents. Just words, words that slid under his skin, sharper than the evidence, sharper than the numbers. For the first time in decades, Richard Alastair sat at his table in silence, his morning coffee untouched. His family hadn't yet stirred, but the air around him felt different, heavy. 3 messages, 3 reminders. That the woman he dismissed as worthless was not only capable of dismantling his illusions, but also had the grace not to destroy him, unless forced to. The weight of the messages across the house. Daniel stirred awake. I sat by the window, watching the sunrise, my phone in hand. I knew Richard had read them. He hadn't replied. He wouldn't, not yet, but silence was enough. Silence meant he had felt the shift. This wasn't about vengeance for me, not really. It wasn't about making him fall. It was about balance. About teaching him the truth he had never learned. You cannot measure a person's worth by pedigree or money. And now, he knew, but the real battle was yet to come. because revenge is never complete with just the strike. The aftermath decides its sweetness, and when we all gathered again at that long table, the balance of power would never be the same. The Alastair estate never knew silence. It was always buzzing, maids gliding across the marble floors, chefs clattering in the kitchen, the faint hum of voices from rooms too large to ever feel like home. But that morning, the house was wrapped in a strange, heavy stillness. The silence wasn't mine, it was his. Richard Alastair didn't roar down the stairs like he usually did, didn't slam his newspaper onto the table, didn't bark orders at the staff. He appeared late to breakfast, his face pale, his jaw stiff. His phone remained in his hand, as though the weight of those 3 messages had fused it to his skin. I was already seated at the long dining table when he entered. Daniel sat beside me, shifting nervously, his eyes darting between me and his father. He hadn't asked about my early morning typing. He didn't know, not yet, but Richard did. He lowered himself into his chair slowly, his eyes flicking toward me, then away. For the first time since I had known him, his gaze carried no dominance, only unease. The clinking of silverware filled the room, brittle and awkward. Daniel's mother glanced between us, sensing the invisible war simmering across the table. Finally, Daniel cleared his throat, unable to bear the silence. "Father, about last night," Richard cut him off, his voice quieter than I had ever heard it. "I don't want to speak about last night." His words shocked Daniel. They shocked me too, but for a different reason. Richard wasn't apologizing. He was deflecting, swallowing his pride before it betrayed him further. But I wasn't going to let silence bury this moment, not again. I set my fork down gently and met his eyes. "No," I said, steady and calm. "We will speak about last night." The room stilled. Even the staff paused at the doorway. "You called me trash," I continued, my voice sharp but even. "You told me I wasn't enough for your son, and you humiliated me in front of everyone. I let it go in silence because I thought dignity was better than anger, but you mistook my silence for weakness." Richard's jaw tightened. His hand curled around his coffee cup, but he didn't lift it. I leaned forward slightly, my voice low, unflinching. "This morning you received 3 messages from me, 3 truths, one about your company, one about my own achievements, and one about the lesson you've never learned, that wealth isn't worth and silence isn't weakness." Daniel's head whipped toward me in shock. His eyes widened. "What messages? What are you talking about?" Richard's face darkened, but not with anger, with shame. He didn't answer his son. He couldn't. For a long, suffocating moment, no one spoke. Then Richard's mother, fragile but sharp, broke the silence. "She is right, Richard." Her voice trembled, but the conviction was there. "You've treated her as though she were beneath us, but it seems she is the only one strong enough to stand equal to you." The words landed like thunder. Richard's grip on the cup faltered, his knuckles whitened, his lips parted, then closed again. For once in his life, Richard Alastair had no clever retort. The husband's stand Daniel finally spoke, his voice firmer than I had ever heard it. "Father, I should have defended her last night. I didn't. I failed her, but I won't make that mistake again." He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "If you can't respect her, you can't respect me. She is my wife. She is my equal, and she deserves to be treated as such." The weight of his words hung in the air, and I saw the flicker of realization cross Richard's face. For the first time, his authority was slipping, not because of money or power, but because of dignity. The turning of the tables, I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. That wasn't the point. I rose from my chair slowly, my voice calm but resolute. "I don't need your approval, Mr. Alastair. I don't need your wealth, your name, or your legacy. What I need, and what I demand, is respect. If you can't give me that, then I will walk away, not from Daniel, but from you. And when I walk away, I will not look back." My words landed with finality, a truth so sharp it cut the air. Richard looked at me, his eyes dark with conflict. For a man who had built his life on control, on bending others to his will, this was a moment he had never known, the taste of power slipping away, not to a rival empire, but to the woman he had dismissed as worthless. He lowered his gaze, and in that small, heavy gesture, I knew the tables had turned. The sweetest revenge wasn't in destroying him. It wasn't in ruining his empire or exposing his sins. Revenge was in standing tall while he sat silent, in making him see that the woman he mocked was the one he could not defeat. I didn't need his apology. I didn't even need his acceptance. What I had gained was far greater: dignity, power, and the undeniable proof that I was more than enough. As I turned and walked out of that room, Daniel by my side, I felt no bitterness, only clarity. Richard Alistair had wanted to break me. Instead, he had built me stronger, and that was the sweetest revenge of all.